Welcome to Beyond Books. I'm Margi Karp-Opperer, Assistant Director at the Novi Public Library, and I'm so excited to have you join me today because I've got a very special guest, Ara Topouzian. I know most of you will know Ara by face and by name because he was our former Economic Development Director for many years at the library, and that's how we got to be so friendly and great colleagues. So I'm happy you're here today.
Well, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. But obviously, we're not going to be talking about that today. We're going to be talking about some of the new things that Ara is involved in.
Great.
So let's take it from there, and perhaps let's start with your love of music, this great passion besides all the other ways that we know you here at Novi. If you wouldn't mind, perhaps what instruments you play.
Well, thanks, Margie. You know, the other side of me has always been that I've loved music, and I love Armenian and Middle Eastern music. And I've been playing professionally, I think, for over 20, 25 years now.
Oh, started when you were a baby.
No, well, yes, that's right. Good answer. You know, I really didn't get into it until after college. I grew up listening to music. I listened to musicians live on stage. Back then, I was listening to old records and really enjoyed the music. And nobody musically inclined in my family. So there wasn't really anyone to teach me, to push me to do it. I just was always, you know, a lover of good music. And so I grew up listening to classical music that had sort of the world music overtones, I noticed. As I get older, I go back to what I used to listen to. And I used to love to listen to some of those composers that had some of the odd sounding notes and whatnot. And I think that's where my passion came of listening and playing Armenian and Middle Eastern music.
So was it just the classical and Armenian, or are you a lover of music across the board?
Well, I've always said I love good music, so I will listen to anything. But you know, growing up, probably a little bit of a nerd listening to classical music. It wasn't really done that often, but I used to love listening to it. I don't know what about it interest me, but I used to listen to jazz. In my house, my mother would play jazz. So when it was on the radios all the time, I remember coming home from school and she'd have the music blaring throughout the house. You'd hear Sinatra, Dean Martin, and you name it. So I listened to a lot of good music when I was younger, and then it just sort of morphed into listening to Armenian, Middle Eastern music, world music. I love listening to a lot of world music today, and it's a lot more accessible now than it was.
Very.
When I was growing up.
And do you play? This is I know the answer.
Yeah.
But what instrument do you play, Ara?
Thank you for asking me, Margie. I play a laptop harp. It's a Middle Eastern harp that's called a kanun, K-A-N-U-N. There's actually a lot of different names to it. I spell it that way. A lot of people spell it that way. And the kanun goes back to the 5th century. It's got 75 strings to it. It, like I said, sits on my lap. It's plucked. To give you a visual, it's a trapezoidal shaped instrument. The strings rest on a bridge. The bridge rests on 3 different chambers of synthetic skin. There's about 10,000 pounds of pressure, that bridge, with the strings in the bridge on the skin. And then toward the left side of the instrument, there are a bunch of levers. And maybe there's about 100 of those different levers, which then give me the tunes, and the range. The instrument itself is designed to do Western, can play Westernized music, but obviously it's for Middle Eastern music. The levers itself allow me to change the notes. And like I said, it goes back many centuries. Armenians, Greeks, Arabs play it, still being played today.
Well, I remember probably about a year ago that you came here and did a concert for us, and it was fabulous.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Most of us, unfortunately, were not aware of this instrument, let alone have heard it. So it was terrific.
There's not a lot of people that play it here in Michigan. There's a few of us, really. The instrument is still a very important one in Armenia and throughout the Middle East. I mean, you'll see, literally hundreds of different musicians, a lot better than me, for sure. And they're master musicians. I mean, they spent their lives learning the music. I mean, it's again, when I said it's a lot more accessible now, the music, watching, the YouTube and everything else, and you see some of these kids that play the instrument. Sometimes you almost want to take your instrument and throw it in the fireplace.
Well, don't do that.
No, I won't.
So let's take that to another level.
Okay.
The Armenian music. Let's get into a little bit about the history, because I
Sure.
know that you recently were awarded this phenomenal recognition and grant. It's called the Knight Foundation Detroit Challenge.
Right.
So congratulations
Thank you.
on that.
Thank you.
That's wonderful for you and wonderful for us, because we will all be able to learn so much from you, and hopefully you'll be on PBS and throughout
that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Well, let me give you a little bit of background on it. A couple years back, I was fortunate to be one of the Kresge Artist Fellows. And from that, it gave me Kresge gave me the opportunity through organizations like Kresge and ArtServe and a lot of other art and cultural organizations in Detroit. It allowed me to do a project. And I said, well, I want to do a live concert. I want to bring some of my friends in, and I want to do a concert of Armenian music in a non-traditional sense. So Armenian music is typically heard in the church dances, the picnics, the weddings and whatnot. But here, not so often, in a non-Armenian setting.
Okay.
And so I utilized all the resources that I could through this initial grant that I had gotten, and presented a concert of Armenian music featuring really some Detroit style of music, and really paid homage to some of the musicians. And we did this at the Charles Wright African American Museum in Midtown. And that was really special to do. I mean, a beautiful auditorium, and just a great venue, and it was nice to give something to Detroit to do that in. It was from that I said, boy, this would be wonderful as a film somehow. And through, again, my connections with Kresge, Knight Foundation was doing an artist challenge and said, we're going to give out matching grants to specific projects. The big difference between the Kresge, that one was more about me as a musician. This was, okay, Mr. Musician, give us a project.
Right.
And the criteria really was art and Detroit, and how do you marry both of them together? And so I had applied to say, well, I want to do a film documentary about the history of Armenian music in Detroit. It's something that I don't think we've seen, we really rarely talk about. And so I was one of 55, I think, other winners of that grant. And it's a matching grant, so I had to raise the money first, and then that kicks in and that's why they call it a challenge.
Okay, well, I know that you're going to be coming to the library to explain more about this, and that is on April 28th.
Right.
So I'm inviting all of your friends, my friends, the community, everyone to come hear more about this, because it's significant that you are doing this at this time because of the 100th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide. So,
which will be next year.
Right. So we'll be celebrating that, getting this documentary going, and sharing this all, and educating us, because so many of us do not know what happened, in around 1915 in Armenia. So,
and this documentary will cover really after that. When the genocide happened, April 24th, 1915 was the beginning of the massacres, and 1.5 million Armenians were massacred.
Right.
About 500,000 survived, and they fled. And the United States was obviously a hub for a lot of Armenians, and Detroit was one of them. We went from 3,000 Armenians before the genocide to around 30,000, and there's roughly maybe 40,000 Armenians in the Detroit metro area now. So this documentary is actually going to cover really after the genocide, the music that was brought over
Right.
from the old country here. And, you know, if I could add, it's so important to talk about this music in here and the culture because, you know, certainly with Ellis Island and immigrants coming and Ford Motor Company was a big attractor
Right.
for Michigan. So you had Armenians living in Highland Park, Delray, and they made a life for themselves. And what they wanted to do was really bring back that culture and that identity. And so not only did you see stores popping up and bakeries and whatnot, but you also saw music coming back. And Armenians were starving to have that music back in their life. So this documentary really talks about after the genocide, throughout, you know, World War II, past that, the Korean War into the mid-60s, where I think these musicians really set the precedent for what we have today. Musicians like myself that still play music here in the community. And it's a forgotten, these are almost forgotten musicians, and I want to definitely highlight that. It's sort of my thank you as well to them for doing what they did.
Well, I can say thank you too, because not only am I very, very excited to follow this process with you and celebrate when it's completed, but to thank you for sharing this with us. I think
my pleasure. Thank you.
We all need to know about all traditions, and we are the melting pot.
Yeah, we
and
are.
we need to stick together and help each other. So
Definitely.
please continue with all this success, and I look forward to April 28th, when you will be here with us. And thank you all for joining us, and we will be back soon. Bye now.